Live.
Good afternoon, Jyoti. I just saw your message. We'll just give it a few minutes for people to log in before we get started. I see people continuously logging in.
And I see some familiar names as well.
Interesting. We'll give it another 2 minutes for people to just come in. We're just about to touch 200 participants. I see we just crossed 200 now. Perfect. So we'll get started. I see we already have a little over 220 folks online. And before I get started, I'd quickly like one of you in the audience to confirm if you can see Veena and I, and if you guys can hear me at the moment. And maybe I'll request Veena to just say a hello to everyone so that you guys can confirm if you guys can see and hear Veena.
Hello. Hi, Rohit, and hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
Hi, Veena. Good afternoon. So yes, I just saw we've got some confirmation. We've got people saying that they can see both of us and they can hear both of us. So with that, let's get started. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the masterclass on building a skill inventory and its impact on your business. So let me start with thanking the All Things Talent team for providing us a platform to host this session. And then thank you all for taking the time out to be here. And since all of you are here, I'm certain that all of you, in some or the other way, are trying to solve the talent challenge for your respective organizations, right? So I'm Rohit, and I have with me Veena, and I shall be your host for the next 60 minutes. And in these 60 minutes, Veena and I shall talk about how Capgemini transformed their learning function to be able to deliver significant value to the business. And in that conversation, some of the topics that shall get covered are going to be around how did Capgemini put together a scientific way to identify training needs aligned with their business goals? How did Capgemini increase the effectiveness of the trainings for their associates? And then how did the value from these trainings increase employee engagement and create substantial value for the organization? But that's not all. Veena will also share with us her knowledge, her experience on a multitude of topics, and will also answer questions that either you have already submitted, or if we have time towards the end of the session, questions that come up during the session. Right. So, guys, feel free to submit your questions during the session using the chat window, and we'll get to them if we have time towards the end of the session. Right. So before we get started, right, a little bit about Capgemini, right? While Capgemini does not need an introduction, it should be or it will be pertinent for me to talk a bit about it so that we are able to place in our minds the scale that we are referring to. Founded in 1967, makes it one of the oldest IT services and consulting company in the world. Revenues of over 18 billion euros and an employee size of over 325,000 people. It again makes it one of the world's oldest and the largest IT services and consulting company, right? And out of this scale that we are talking about, India has been a country that has been a center of action for Capgemini in multiple ways. They had their own offshore development center. Then they went about acquiring companies like Capgemini, iGate, and iGate was a company that acquired Patni Computers before they got acquired by Capgemini. Altran, in addition to a lot many names. And Veena represents their learning function and is an alumnus of BITS Pilani and University of Pune. And she, along with her, carries a legacy as one of the employees who's gone through the entire journey from Patni to iGate and to Capgemini now, and from being a faculty at the start of her career to leading technology training delivery for Capgemini in India. Right? Phenomenal, isn't it? She also leads some of the Capgemini's global flagship technology training offerings and is passionate about technology, learning, and contributes to various workforce transformation and skilling initiatives aligned to organizational. Right. While IT services and IT consulting has been around for decades now, right, and has become the backbone for all industries, all businesses across the globe. Right, and I think all of us would agree that no business across the globe can think of existing, can think of existing without the help of technology these days. But the last 2.5 years since the onset of the pandemic, right, we've seen a very different mindset for adopting technology solutions in businesses. across the globe. And that mindset has touched the daily lives of all humans like you and me, right? Take this seminar for an example, right? A few years back, we would probably get together in a conference hall, right, and have such conversations, right? We probably wouldn't have imagined a little over 300 people being on an online Zoom call having this conversation, right? And that's how technology has impacted our lives. So let's start with understanding from Veena, right? How has the business or the technology landscape been for Capgemini in the last 2.5 years, right? So, Veena, welcome to the seminar, right? Thank you for taking the time out to be with us, be with all of us, right? And sharing your experiences, your perspective, right? Which in some or the other form, I'm certain will help all of us go back to our respective work lives and add more value to our organizations. So over to you, Veena. How has the business technology landscape been for Capgemini in the last 2.5 years?
Thank you. Thank you again, Rohit, for having me here, and really happy to be out here speaking with so many of us on this particular conversation. It's a conversation that we all learn from each other and try to incorporate our best practices, share what's happening. So, if I were to speak about the unprecedented last 2+ years, right? I mean, who knew that it's going to stretch on and it's going to completely change the way we are doing things. From a business perspective, from a technology perspective, if I were to kind of encapsulate it in something short, I would say the major underlying trend was the whole acceleration in the digital transformation at the end of our customers. We do have customers from across various domains, various sectors, and I think earlier it would be a case of yes, we need to do the digital transformation. It's something good to be, was never considered a necessity, though the trend had started changing. But all those questions went for a toss when the pandemic was, just like that upon all of us. No longer was getting digital, going into a digital presence or having a way of business that was digital, no longer was it a luxury or a good to have. It became a necessity. It became something that had to be done here and now, because it's just disrupting everything around you. It wasn't focused on one particular domain and sector, it came all through. So everything digital, and when I say digital, it's about, okay, wherever I am, how can I access a business, a service? How can it be made more 24 by 7? How can it be real time? How can it be user centric? How can you have feedback coming in and getting incorporated continuously, making those enhancements and improvements? So just about everything going digital was I think the underlying thing that happened at our customers' end, which obviously meant that those were the changes that we had to do at our end as well. And just to close on that particular response, I think it was also not just the technology changing, and I'm sure we'll talk more about the technologies. It was also the business models changing,
Models
things
change.
getting obviously more agile, more DevOps related, right?
Yep.
So I think that's the kind of shift we saw.
Perfect. Brilliant, Veena. Thank you so much. Right. And just to add to what Veena said, I can think of multiple examples here. Right? When we were in our first lockdown in the month of March 2020, right, people were wondering how will they get food. And then all of a sudden, right, players like a Grofers, Blinkit, Zepto, etc., came in and ensured that we get everything home, right, at the click of a button on our phone. Right. So that's the kind of impact that Veena is referring to, right? And companies like Zepto or a Blinkit, right, while they are in India, companies equivalent to them across the globe needed help to be able to set up those kind of technologies, right? And then get them to be adopted by the user at a scale that was phenomenal, right? So Veena, with the adoption of technology at never seen kind of scales across the globe, right? How has Capgemini been scaling its talent capabilities, right? Because one element of it is the tech, the other element of it, and the most important element of it is the people, right? Because people are the ones who are going to build that technology. So how did you and your teams scale the entire talent capability landscape within Capgemini?
Of course, I think never easy, right? It's unlike a lot of other industries. It's people that drives
Yeah,
everything in our industry. So, which means if you have to suddenly boost up what you're doing, you need people. Where will the people come from? Because you already have already a lot of work going on within the organization.
organization.
The simple answer is okay, recruit people maybe that are experienced because you need something to be done here and now. But there's only so much that's there in the market. You know, where do you
Market.
go beyond to recruit? It's the same pool that all of us in the industry are competing for. So the next
Yeah,
thing would be, okay, can I ramp up the hiring that we can do at the entry level? You know, can we increase it? So obviously that's the other part of it. So broadly increasing the hiring at both the lateral and the entry level, but then it's not just getting in people. It's about the people that are within also, because you're talking about a shifting nature of skills because you're going more
yes,
digital. Your employees may not already be equipped with all the digital skills that you really need to have. So it's all about, okay, I need to get talent. I also need to look at my existing talent, look at the upskilling that we need to do, look at the reskilling that we need to do. It's a shift that we are talking about, moving to the newer set of skills. And
skills.
while you do all this, the best thing is the way we do it, you know, as L&D also has shifted. You know, you no longer talk about an instructor led training environment. You're talking about going virtual, you're talking about going digital. So I think really huge amount of changes there in terms of getting talent, looking at the existing talent, ensuring that we come up with ways and means of ramping up, upskilling and reskilling that talent for the kind of demand that we saw due to the changing business scenarios.
Perfect. So you guys heard Veena talk about hiring additional folks from outside and hiring not only experienced folks, but ramping up on hiring fresh graduates. But again, that also wasn't enough for supporting the business that was growing at a phenomenal scale and was also adopting to a certain set of new technologies, right? Driving a kind of digital transformation needed different new skills, etc., etc., right? So with this increased intake of talent, Veena, did you also witness a trend around some specific skills, talent capabilities, etc., etc.?
Yes, definitely, because we are talking about everything digital. And when we are talking about everything digital, I think some of the key skill sets that we saw where we needed additional people to be, you know, there on the projects, it did include things like cloud, it did include things like data, cyber security. You know, it's very important when all of us are sitting. You're no longer, I mean, even from a office perspective, you're no longer in a campus with all those firewalls and other infrastructure taking care of your needs. It's like having maybe 150,000 offices for each of the employees that are sitting in their respective homes. So and the same applies for business, right? So it's about cybersecurity. It's about CRM, because your customer is at the center of things. So how do you look at it? Even from a perspective of an SAP or an Oracle, where you did have a lot of talent already, but it was also about those were also going into cloud, right? So the flavor of cloud started coming in almost all the areas, is what I'll say. And of course, I talked about the business models as well. So we are going more agile. We need to look at more automation. We need to look at all those things that make things digital for our customers. So yes, I think it was an increased focus on anything digital, and which included all of this, like cloud, like big data, like analytics, like AI, like cybersecurity, like CRM, so on.
Phenomenal, Veena. So you guys heard Veena talk about the kind of skills, the kind of talent capabilities that slowly, gradually, or maybe overnight emerged to be very critical for successfully running your businesses, right? And I can relate to cybersecurity. None of us are in the office, all of us are sitting at home, right? And you've got to ensure that all your infrastructure, all your data is protected, and so on and so forth, right? So Veena, with the supply of such kind of talent being very limited, and the great resignation also playing havoc for all of us, right? Until a few weeks back, I've been hearing stories of how it is stabilizing, how people have started maybe making decisions more judiciously, and so on and so forth. So how did you and the entire talent and the HR team at Capgemini support the business through so many challenges?
I think the scale up that was needed was enormous. Easily a 2x to 3x kind of scale up is what we are talking about, as against what used to be the case. And also, like I said, in a digital world. So we had to take care of our own models as well. So if you're talking about recruitment as an example, if you do need to scale up that much, then how do you look at the new sourcing channels? How do you engage with the new sourcing channels? How do you look at maybe specialized vendors that can help you recruit in some of the niche categories? We talked about the availability of the talent in the pool. You may not have so much. Then what would you do if you don't have people? Then the way we look at it is, okay, can I recruit somebody with an adjacent skill set, somebody who comes with a certain basic level of skills, and then ramp them up? So as an example, if full stack is something that we need, a Java full stack is something that I need, I don't have enough of them in the market, not easy to recruit or onboard them, then can we look at people who come with some minimum amount of skill set, and we pick them up, we are able to then upskill them, train them on the overall set of skills that we need. So I think that became one of the trends that we saw. Look at channels that we would not have thought about before in terms of getting people into the company. And most importantly, since I'm talking about scale here, I think it was also digital that helped us scale up. While digital was the need of the hour, and it was also digital that really helped us as HR functions to be able to scale up our operations. I would say automation as well, to help us scale up and be able to do what we needed to do, to really ramp up and to be agile, to be able to meet the business requirements there.
Perfect. Thank you, Veena. So, and I can relate to it, right? Uh, there are not enough people, right, who fit in the criteria that you've defined as a company to the extent of 100%. So what do you do, right? And that too at a scale which is 2x, 3x of what it used to be traditionally, right? So I don't think there's anything other than looking at alternates. And that's what I think the team at Capgemini did, thought outside the box, figured out what could be adjacent skills, what do you need inside an individual for that individual to be able to learn the rest of the component and become a full stack developer, right? And then scaling up all of these models through automation and tools and so on and so forth, right? So guys, I'd like to do a quick check with all of you here. Right? We've built up, Veena has been setting context so far, right? Are you guys enjoying it? Right? Are you guys clued in? right? Is it all making sense to you guys? So maybe some feedback in the form of messages, chats would help, right? Because so far the conversation that Veena and I have been having is more around setting the context so that you guys can visualize. And I'm sure all of you can relate to what Veena is talking about because this is what we all of us have gone through in the last few years. Perfect. So I see some of our members in the audience saying yes, all relevant, and so on and so forth. Perfect. So I'll continue, right? So Veena, you spoke a little bit about tools, right? Automation while scaling up all of the functions, right? And since I've been working very closely with Capgemini in some of the other form, right? And Capgemini uses my tool. I know for a matter of fact that Capgemini has been an early adopter of tools, technology themselves for all of their HR functions. But here was a situation wherein you had to shift to 100% virtual and that too almost like overnight, right? So how did you guys go about doing it? Would you like to talk a little bit about the tools that enabled you guys to do that and in what ways?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's an area that's very dear to my heart. And Rohit, you said we are generally amongst the early adopters. So I'm pretty proud to say that it wasn't the pandemic that made us go digital. And I'll speak more on the learning space because that's what is of interest, and I can talk more about that piece of it. So going digital from a learning bit was something that was already in the works for us. We were already working towards deployment. We done some pilots. We were working towards deployment, which was the middle of that year. So what the pandemic actually ensured was that we had to accelerate that particular deployment. And you put it very correctly when you said you had to make the change really quickly. So let me give you this example. We had, at any point in time, we have several college hires or young professionals, as we call them, that are undergoing training in our campuses across various cities. A lot of them stay away from their homes. They are fresh out of colleges. They need a little bit of that hand holding to become like good citizens of the corporate world, become acclimatized, if I may say, to the corporate world. And suddenly, when the pandemic hit, we were having all these calls from families, people wondering what will happen to their children. You said, okay, you can't continue training in this way. And that's when we went digital. So it was literally in a period of 2 weeks or even lesser, I forget, but literally in a very short time frame that we moved our entire entry level training, which was happening almost in 100% instructor led way in our classrooms. We went digital. And when I said we went digital, you talked about the platforms, tools, and all of that. So we have today an entire digital learning ecosystem where we have a learning experience platform, and sitting behind those learning experience platform are several content libraries. We have partner contents, and it's not just the contents, right? I mean, contents are good to understand, learn the concept, but for something like technology, you need labs. You need to get your hands dirty, do some assignments, stuff like that. You need to assess where you are, and Rohit, that's where you are supporting us in terms of the digital assessments that we are doing. Going digital also means, okay, how do we enable the peer-to-peer learning interactions, which goes without say when you're all together in a classroom. So how do you enable that kind of an ecosystem? How do you have mentors that can support? How do you bring in something like a gamification? How do you bring in collaboration? So there were lots of these aspects that had to be brought together. Because we were already piloting, we already had like a minimum viable product or an MVP, as we call it, in place. It was easier for us to accelerate the rollout and the deployment. And obviously, when you're doing something like this, it just can't happen overnight. It's a journey, and you need to upskill your own teams first. You need to upskill L&D first to be able to make this particular shift, because they are then your ambassadors for the wider population. You need to ensure that the top leadership is onboarded, because they can then become the champions for you as you go forward. But I think what's important is taking everybody along, setting some goals, of what you want to achieve, put in some relevant learning recommendations. So just giving a platform, tools, technologies, not enough. You have to work towards the adoption of it, and how do you then move to a digital first approach, and things like that. I can go on, but let me pause, and probably you can carry on that thread.
Perfect. And I'm sure, Veena, there are a few questions that I already have for you, which we will take up towards the end of this conversation, where people have more questions around how did you go about doing some of these things. But phenomenal, right? Putting together an ecosystem which has a learning experience platform, content, right, labs, assessment, ensuring that the whole adoption piece is taken care of, and so on and so forth, right? And I feel very privileged to be a part of many conversations with you and your teams and figuring out this whole ecosystem between labs, practice, assignments, assessments, etc., right? So all of this would have needed a lot of change in mindset and delivery models for your own teams. How easy, how hard was it for you to drive that change?
It wasn't easy at all. I mean, believe me, it's not easy. It's not easy for everybody across the board. I mean, look at learners, for example. They are our customers, and they are used to. And if I'm talking here more about the Indian learner, our audience here in our classrooms, they are used to coming in 9:30, be there the entire day. There is somebody there, the set of SMEs, faculty members that are guiding them through everything that they need to do. They're doing the lectures, they're telling them, now do this assignment, now try this out. It's a very, very guided environment that they are used to. Suddenly you tell them, hey, this is all that you have in your hands. You are now the owner of your learning. You're suddenly setting them free and giving them so much to look at. Believe me, it's like when you set, it's like somebody who's there in a construct within a framework, and then you say, hey, now you can do whatever you want. You learn whenever you want, pick up what you need. Uh, Owning it up, and even learning to navigate through that landscape, teaching them how to fly. The flying will come later, but you need to teach them how to fly. That's something from a learner point of view, that's lots. But how do they become used to that? So that's a mindset change that you're talking about. Then think about the managers and the leaders. They are happy saying, okay, I send this person for a 5 days deep dive session, and he comes with all this knowledge at the end of it. Now the questions are, you're saying you'll do everything digital, and I'm not talking about the virtual kind of digital, not what you and I are doing here, where there is this interaction or the connect that's happening with the facilitator. It's more of self-driven. It's more of people doing things on their own. So the relevant questions that come from managers and leaders are, can it be effective? Will they learn? And how do I know they're learning? Those kind of questions. So how do you manage that change in mindset? And then, like I said, L&D itself, right? I mean, you mentioned I started as a faculty. Probably there are other faculty members on this forum, and they'll all tell you, as faculty, we love to teach. We love to talk. We love to take our audience through a defined learning journey. Suddenly you're telling me that you have a different role to play. You don't need to teach anymore. You need to facilitate it. You need to mentor. You're not doing like a 4 hours or a 8 hour session. you're going to get 2 hours to do some kind of a mentoring for your set of learners. You're not going to create material, that's all there. We'd like you to curate what's there. We'd like you to value add. It's really a good thing that a lot of contents are already there, but you're taking away a lot of things that I was originally doing as an L&D facilitator. And how do I then value add? So how do I contextualize what my learner is doing already in the digital environment? That's not something that comes very easily. So all of this, a lot of mindset changes, right? I won't say opposition, I won't say hesitation. It's just the change management. It's just that everybody needs to be going through this change management. It's a journey, doesn't happen, overnight. But when we went with that approach that and of course, like I said, the pandemic meant that you didn't have an alternative. So it's then about, okay, if I'm going with a digital first approach, how do I address some of this? Like, do I make it blended to give in that little bit of a facilitator connect? Do I get in influencers, early adopters who can help us drive this particular change? Be able to demonstrate, when you do integrate labs, when you do integrate assessments, be able to demonstrate that yes, you're not, you're actually adding value with the additional time that you're able to get with the learners. You're not losing anything out. So when you show it with data, I think that really drives home the point. Yes, the mindset is required, not easy, but if if you kind of persist, and we did, I think we saw some really fabulous results.
Awesome. And again, phenomenal, Veena. So while you were talking, I was just listening. And one thing that you said was data, right? If you have data with you, right, you don't need probably anything else. Just build a story out of the data and you'll be able to drive whatever change that you want to drive, right? So once you were able to deal with all of these changes, Veena, and I'm sure you used a lot of data and so on and so forth, right? What kind of outcomes did you start seeing, right? Examples or things around how did you make the learning that people went through stick with them for a longer duration, right? How did you measure effectiveness of some of these learning programs that people went through and so on and so forth? So how did you go about driving some of these things?
Yeah, I think they were at different levels. Probably to continue a little bit more on what I was saying, because it then adds to what I'm going to say in terms of the effectiveness. We were talking about moving into digital. We were talking about addressing some of these mindset changes that are really needed. We did go with some, well-defined goals. Simple things to begin with. How many of your learners are you able to onboard onto your digital learning ecosystem? So we had some targets by ourselves: end of Q3, end of the year, what's the percentage that we'd like to see within India. You talked about data, so how to make it data driven. We used to have different segmentations, different cuts. Is it going well with a particular grade of learners? Which learner community is adapting better? Is it going well in a particular business unit, in a particular project? So that helps you make it even more targeted in terms of reaching the adoption. So metrics like adoption or getting people onto the platform, or then looking at, okay, what is it that they're consuming on the platform? Again, like I said before, and I repeat, that it's not enough to just give a platform and say, hey, go and learn. Everything is at your fingertip. I think what was also important for us is to make relevant contents available, make those curated contents available, add in those assessments, add in those labs so that people are able to use it, right? Typical learning metrics of average learning hours, number of people, all that is there. But what's important is how does it translate for the business? So are you able to impact or influence in any way the turnaround time that it takes for them to get people deployed, to get them built, particularly when you're looking at young professionals? Are we able to sharpen the axe, so to say, from their proficiency level perspective? Again, if I talk about the data, if we have the assessment data as an example, that tells us what is the proficiency level of our learner in different topics or different areas. That also helps you personalize learning. I mean, why do you want your learner to go through that 20 hours of contents where possibly the pockets of those subjects is what they need? And how do you make that out? Okay, data. And then how is that helping the business? They are able to ramp up or get a skilled resource in much lesser time frame. So I think the time to build, the time to ramp up on these skills, the utilization levels that were there, enhancing the capabilities. So we do several of these where we do what we call as a baselining activity. Especially when we are talking about moving to the new set of skills. Earlier we talked about adjacent skills and helping our learners move to the new set of skills. So we do want to look at, okay, where are our learners now, and based on how they are doing, give them very personalized, very relevant learning, and at the end of it, again, see where they stand. And it's very heartening to see that you usually get a 5 to 10% increase in the capability or the proficiency level that we see at. So I think many such factors that really told us, and probably one of the things that I'll say is when people come back to you, right? That itself is proof that yeah, it's working, because initially you're starting with, hey, maybe you want to try this, you want to do this, and then when business comes back to you and says, look, this is my need, can you do something for me? Can you put up a specific learning intervention for my project, my account, that is much more customized for my set of employees? Then you know that they've really signed up, and they are into it. So I think lot of such things that we've seen. Of course, our surveys have told us that, whether it is internal surveys or external surveys, how our employees have really loved the way we have gone about doing this change.
Awesome. Out of so many very interesting things that you spoke about, Veena, one thing that's stuck in my mind is helping the business get people who are probably ready to be deployed onto a project faster, quicker, and with a lot of accuracy using data, right? Where were they before they started any kind of learning? Where they are right after they completed that learning, and how ready are to be deployed, right? And for a company like Capgemini, that impacts the top line and the bottom line both, right? Which is phenomenal, right? And since we are on this topic of making people ready to be deployed into projects faster, quicker, with a lot of data, right? And in addition to a lot of other outcomes that you drove, right, you guys also ended up building a kind of skill inventory within the organization, right? Which again helped business prioritize a lot of stuff, figure out a lot of stuff from an execution standpoint. So would you want to talk a little bit about how did you go about building it, and how is it helping both your associates and your business?
Sure. Honestly, the skill inventory has always been there, but it's got more strengthened, I would say, as we went about this particular process. Uh, a lot of things going digital, a lot of things getting automated makes a lot of difference, and it's also the transparency of what is there that becomes available to everybody. So for example, if somebody has done the training, that's all available there. RLXP does allow our employees to update their skill levels on the platform itself. We also have our other resourcing platform where people are able to go and update their skills and proficiency level. I think as we did all of this, it was also maybe updating our master list itself, because we talked about a whole lot of new skills coming in into the picture. So ensuring that our skills taxonomy remains aligned with the changing times, that was definitely an important thing to do. Ensuring the compliance, because if we need to ensure that people do go and make their updates where they need to, but in other places also ensuring the data flows happen. If an assessment has happened through a LXP which is on another platform, ensuring that that comes into our learning management system and people are able to see that to take deployment decisions. That's also part of the whole skill inventories that we're talking about. From an employee perspective, I think we talk about career frameworks, we talk about the career roadmaps. This actually helps us understand that, okay, this is where I am today from my skills, my proficiencies perspective. If I look at the entire roadmap, if I need to see where I want to be 2 years, 5 years down the line, uh, okay, these are the skills that I need to look at. Those skills are connected with my learning journeys. When I do a particular learning journey, I know I'm working towards XYZ skills. When we talked about adjacent skills earlier, we know that, okay, if I am in this particular skill basket, so to say, I will be able to pick up these other skills that we're talking about. So I think for us, it was more of strengthening the inventory that's there, uh, good inputs that can come for not only the career development part of it, but even the career growth, the decisions around salaries and promotions. I mean, you just have to think creatively of where you can use each of these inputs. But the possibilities are enormous, I would say.
Phenomenal, Veena, right? So you spoke about a lot of stuff here, right? Skill inventory helping in deployment, skill inventory helping or making people aware of where they are against where they would like to be in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then eventually they going through that learning journey with a lot of hands-on practice assessments, all embedded into the same platform and so on and so forth. So what I see here is a lot of focus on both help people find the best option for themselves and help the business find the most relevant people for them to be able to deliver better to their customers, right? So what was the kind of impact, or did you guys see an increased engagement levels within the company, and did that kind of help you in some way in terms of retention, right? All of us last 2 years have seen that great resignation, right? So how did some of this, and I personally believe that it would have helped to a large extent, but do you want to talk a little bit about it? How did it all pan out for Capgemini and you and your teams?
Well, I think multiple factors come into play when we talk about retention. So, if I were again just to talk about my learning bit, definitely learning opportunities is a huge enabler. When they see that, our employees see that, it's enabling the growth for them, the career progression for them. I think there's a better binding that's there with the organization, and that pretty much comes out in our engagement scores that we see, whether it is the internal, and we do monthly surveys, by the way. So, whether it's the internal listening tool that we have in the organization for all our employees, or the external platforms. And we continue to build on these, right? I mean, when you talk about engagement, just to give you a quick example, take college hires, take our young professionals. A lot of us recruit them when they are in the final year, probably the seventh semester of an engineering graduate. But we kind of start the onboarding learning for them while they are there, and that means we don't just do it just like that. I mean, it's the similar platform that we're using for our employees, maybe a lightweight form of that platform that we have extended to our young professionals as well. So that is really engagement at a pre-boarding stage that we're talking about. We do the entire training, and then there's the continued engagement with what we call as the alumni of our young professionals. So we do believe that the learning cycle for the young professionals is not just that 2 or 3 months where they're going that through that extensive training, but a wider time span that starts before and ends later. So I would imagine that these kind of learning opportunities do have a role to play in ensuring that employees remain with us for long to come. And you talked about my journey. I think I'm a great example of how somebody's been there for a long time.
Brilliant, right? From where she was when she started. I think she's Veena star. You started your career as a fresh graduate, right, with Patni
Yeah,
Computers.
I did have a previous
Some
stint
bit of
before I
experience,
joined
got it.
here, but
Joined.
yeah, yeah.
So, so long. So and that's what I think people look for, right? Companies investing in them, right? Helping them see a future for themselves, and that too through a very structured approach. And I personally believe that Capgemini has been able to put that structured approach in place for each of their employees, where right everything is digital, right? You get to know, you take some activity assessments, etc. You get to know where you stand. Then you choose your own learning path, you choose your own learning journey. You've got practice, constant assessments, etc available to you, right? So who wouldn't get excited to be in an environment which basically, I would use the word, democratize my own growth for my own self, right? So Veena, with all of such very interesting things, and I'm also keeping a watch on the time, we've got 8 more minutes left, right? Would you want to summarize all of this for the audience, and then maybe cover things like how have you seen learning as a function transform from what it was maybe a few years back or in the last decade to what it is today? That's one. Two, what are some of the key elements that an organization needs to be mindful of when trying to build a learning culture within the organization? And again, I'm picking up from your example, democratize it for everyone, make them responsible for it, right? And then the last element is, how do you see learning evolve from where it is today, right? To keep pace with the evolving and the growing business scenario, right? To maybe in 5 years from now, right? So, would you like to just quickly summarize your thoughts, your experience, what you guys do at Capgemini? How are you guys thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try. Summarizing is not so simple, but yeah, a
Sure.
lot of
Yeah.
changes in
Same.
the learning space. I think it's become more learner centric now. Learner takes more responsibility, needs to take more responsibility for his or her own growth and learning. Instilling that mindset of learning, of being a continuous learner, and you'll see that as an important skill. I mean, we talk about being able to unlearn, relearn, right? All of that is part of the whole story. Learning in the flow of work, moving in that direction where as and when you need learning, you have it available, and therefore you focus more on being able to apply that learning. I don't think learning is only what L&D does. Learning happens all the time, everywhere. Learning happens through communities, learning happens on the job. So, being able to bring in the formal and the informal ways of learning together, being able to leverage the strengths of what both of them bring in, I think that's what we will continue to see. But what's important is, yes, leverage the technologies out there. So if there's a metaverse coming up, how best can we include metaverse? And we don't include it for the sake of including it. That's not it. Where do you have the right use cases that will help you make that learning much more effective with the inclusion of the new technologies that are coming in? And more, I think it's also about integrating our systems. We talked about the value that learning brings in. You have a recruitment system, you have maybe an internal job posting system, you have a resourcing tool, you have a learning tool, and more often than not, these platforms uh, don't talk to each other as seamlessly as they should. But I think that's the direction where we really need to move towards. Automate more, see how these can communicate more easily. So if I were an employee looking for a different role within my own organization, it's probably already there saying, hey, these are a couple of opportunities you may be interested in. These are the learning journeys that you may want to see. These are the projects you may want to do. This is the assessment that you might want to take. And hey, a lot of things that a lot of operational bandwidth can get released, and it really makes the whole process uh, a richer experience, I would say, and of course much better with the business. And last of all, it's always about two things, right? It's about being aligned with the business to bring value to what the business is, but it's also about every individual learner, the experience, the learning experience that he or she can take away from it. I think those to me would be really, really important. I don't think that's going to change, even if a lot of other things change. I think that is something that's going to be continuing to be important for a learning professional.
Brilliant. Thank you, Veena. Right, and so my personal takeaway from this conversation is, right, it is phenomenal to be able to create that fine balance between an individual's whatever career trajectory or developmental needs and the needs of the business, because eventually you've got to marry both of them, right, for both of them to be able to, right, to be at a place where they need to be, right. One of them cannot be in isolation, right. So what my takeaway from this conversation is that Veena and team at Capgemini have been able to put through an ecosystem which is driven by automation and technology, which democratizes the whole learning journey, career path for an individual in line with what the business needs. Right. So, Veena, thank you so much. Right. And I personally feel very, very, very privileged to be a part of this journey that Capgemini is going through multiple conversations with Veena and her team members, but more than that, through some of the initiatives, right, which we have been a part of as DoSelect, right. So with that, Veena, what we'll do is the last few minutes, and I think we are going to overshoot by 5-7 minutes because we've got a lot of questions that people submitted even before this before we went live. And I remember having going through some 200 plus questions, and I was like, I can't do justice to all of these 200. So what I did is I tried mixing matching a lot of them into one, and so on and so forth. And so what I'm going to do is we've picked a few from those 200 that we felt was very, very relevant for this topic, this subject, and I'm going to run them past you for you to be able to answer to the audience. And some of these may have already been answered during the course of the conversation, right? And after that, we'll probably take one or two questions from the live audience, because I was reading through some of the questions and some of them are very, very interesting. So the first one, and I think you covered it during your conversation, how do we build a skill inventory and how often should we update it? And at what stage of the organization's growth should one build it?
I think earlier the better, and it's a continuous journey of updates. Maybe something like a master list could have a governance update once a quarter, once in a half year, depending on the size of business or skills that we're looking at. But uh, I would say, in terms of update, it really has to be continuous, and wherever automation is possible, to whichever extent it is possible, that's always better to keep it all current and moving. The last thing you want to do is put in something together that has information from long back. Doesn't serve anybody's purpose.
Yeah, and you are a living example of being able to keep it updated, right? Online, democratize it. Just let people do it whenever they want it,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And that's the way to go about it. So the next one, Veena, and we'll probably make it a kind of rapid fire from here because we're already
Sure.
behind time. So can a skill inventory be beneficial in strategic HR planning?
Of course, because as we know, what is it that is needed for the organization, that pretty much tells you the gaps that are there. That pretty much tells you which are the areas that you want to focus on. It can drive your learning agenda, a whole lot of other agendas. So definitely.
Right. Next one. What are the latest upskilling and reskilling trends in the industry? And you covered a bit of it during the conversation.
Wow, I think anything digital, anything cloud, anything AI, anything scripting, Python, web development, JavaScript. Uh, I did mention one, which I think I should definitely mention, is what we in Capgemini call intelligent industry. Which brings in, how do you make your products more intelligent? So while AI is there, edge computing is there, cloud is there, IoT is there. I think it's more and more moving away from boundaries and getting them all together. I think that's where we are headed.
Perfect. Next one. How do you analyze ROI and impact of L&D initiatives?
Wow, $1 million question. I think the ROI question is something that's already there. So at two levels, I would say, if you're doing something at a very large scale, not easy to talk about it. You might still talk about your usual learning metrics, but when we do a very dedicated learning intervention, a quick example, if I may. So we had this scenario where on a project, our business said that we are getting a lot of design defects and we need to fix it. So we put together a design related, software design related program. We already knew, okay, this is the scale at which the defects are manifesting themselves, and we did the program 3 months down the line. This is over and above all the surveys and everything that we do. We actually could go back and see, okay, now that the people are trained, how does this look like? Not easy to do for every single situation, because it can become very context sensitive. But then, yeah, I think we can look at it at critical learning interventions or programs.
Interesting. Very interesting. The next one is a very interesting question. How do you train people for culture? Is there even a way to do it?
Okay, I don't think. I mean, of course, any skill and every skill is teachable and learnable, is what I go by, because maybe because I'm a learning professional, I say that. But culture is something that people will imbibe by what they see in and around. So while you can influence, while you can, show those indications, I think that's something people will learn on the go when they see around it. Uh, Probably there's so much that you can do in terms of teaching. uh, it's less teaching and more learning, more that the learner will imbibe based on what or he or she sees around in the environment.
Brilliant, right? Now, so these were a few questions that we had shortlisted, and I'm gonna what I'm gonna do now is look at a few questions that have come in live, right? And maybe request Veena to answer them or share her perspective against those questions. And we'll just pick up two or three, not too many, Veena, because I know we are already beyond time. So the first one is, how effective is choosing or hiring an alternative skill set candidate help the business? And this is from somebody who's an anonymous attendee. Our friend wants to hide his or her identity.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I think having an understanding of what are some of these adjacent skill sets will help. To give an example, if I'm talking, I gave an example of the Java full stack earlier, which was an example of I go with some basic skills, but I build on that. Uh, let's say I really need Salesforce people, and I don't have enough Salesforce talent available in the market. Then I might look at, okay, can I pick up a Microsoft .NET guy? Can I pick up a Java guy and then get them onto the Salesforce route? So I think it's being able to identify the right set of adjacent skills that you might want to look at and then be able to train them. Not that you can't train the others, the turnaround time will just be much longer otherwise. So I think that's the call that we need to take. It's effective though.
Brilliant. And I'm just trying to go through questions in the meanwhile. And I see another question from a friend of ours called Jyoti Jetwani, which says, three trends that you believe will shape the future of learning and development in workplace.
To me, I think content is and will remain central to learning. The formats may change. It has continued to change, but that's finally what the learner is going to pick up. So content, experience, because today we are moving more and more into a workforce which is restless. We talk enough about the attention spans and things like that. So how do you make it a complete learning experience is another important thing for me. And third, I probably made that point earlier, but reiterating, I think it's not just L&D that, L&D can drive a lot of things, can drive the learning, but it's always everybody. It takes a village, like they say. So community-based learning, how can you engage with the entire community to make the learning more efficient and effective? To me, those would be the three things.
Awesome. So I think this was phenomenal, right? Community based learning, right? Getting people to come together to be able to learn from each other, right? I think we've got a lot of tools at our disposal. The entire social media brings all of us together. So with that, I think okay, we've had a great conversation, right, with Veena today, where I'm sure all of us learned a lot. And I see there are a few more questions that are still coming in, right? And so what we'll do is we'll curate these questions, right? We'll curate these questions and then maybe send them to Veena. She can maybe kind of give us a kind of written answer and then share it with you guys over the next few days. Right? And I'm not sure if she'll be able to find time out of her busy schedule, but we'll request her to do that. Right. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you once again and the All Things Talent team for giving us this opportunity to bring all of you onto this platform and learning from Veena the way she's gone about helping the business be successful through providing right skills, talent that the business needed in very difficult times, through automating the whole workflow and automating the whole workflow for a scale which was 2x 3x of what it used to be in the past, and that too at a very short notice. So phenomenal. Veena, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us, and we'd love to probably have more conversations with you of similar kinds in the future. And so thank you. And guys, with that, I'll bid you a bye for now, and we'll probably meet again soon with Veena and more conversations with more folks from the industry.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Veena.
Been a very interesting conversation. Thanks everybody for patiently staying on and listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Veena. Bye.